So how's it going, ladies and gents, and welcome back to the channel. Today guys, we're doing Master Duel, and with that sense, we are doing a guide for the branded Despia. Now a few days back, I placed a poll in the community on a guide that most of the new players in Master Duel want to see. Most of the players had a unanimous decision of or wanting to see a branded Despia guide. So here it is, guys. Let's go. Let's go. Go. So first and foremost, we are going to tackle the two level 4 monsters that is very important for the deck, namely Fallen of Albaz, and second, Aluber, Jester of Despia. So Fallen of Albaz is a level 4 dragon type monster. Once normal summoned or special summoned to the field, you can use your opponent's monster as a fodder for a fusion summon. Now the fusion monster will vary from time to time depending on the material used or targeted for Fallen of Albaz. Now, one thing to take note, if Fallen of Albaz is destroyed without ever resolving its effect, then there will be no special summon that will occur. Same goes if that monster on your opponent's side of the field leaves the field or leaves the target, there will be no special summon that will happen. So that is it. But most of the time, guys, you won't ever see Fallen of Albaz be summoned to the field, because this monster will be used as a fusion material for either Lubellion or even Mirror Jade, if ever that's the case. So it's either from the graveyard, sent to the graveyard, or then from the graveyard back to your deck. That's the only destination for Fallen of Albaz. Next up, we have Aluber, the Jester of Despia. First and foremost, once normal summon or special summon to the field, you can search out a branded spell or trap from your deck to your hand. With regards to the branded cards that you can get, this is by any means in order. Branded Fusion, branded in red, branded Opening, or branded in Lost. So that is the 4 cards that is really useful for the deck. There are 2 other branded cards, which is the Theater of the Branded and Branded Sword, which is somewhat significant in a sense, but I would say it's highly optional for you guys to even add that one for your deck. Theater is a field spell polymerization, but if once it's destroyed before it resolves, then there will be no spell summon. Other than that, if a fairy monster leaves the field, you can spell summon one fusion monster from your graveyard and special summon it to your side of the field. Next up, we have a branded sword, which is, of course, its relevant effect is just you can banish this card from the graveyard, retrieve a Fallen of Albaz or any monster that mentions Albaz in its name. So basically, your target for that is Mercurier or even Albaz itself. So that is it. So, but yeah, 4 basic targets or important targets for Aluber is those cards right there. Now, if you ever have Branded Fusion in hand already, then you go towards Branded in red. Then if you ever have Branded in red, then move towards Branded Opening, and so on, so on. So that is the 2 level 4 monsters. Let's move towards the other Despia monsters. So with regards to the Despia monsters, there are only 4 additional Despia monsters that we're just gonna tackle. First and foremost, we have here Comedy. So Comedy's effect, once this card is in your hand, and your Despia monster is targeted for an effect, you can discard this card to negate the activation or negate the effect of that card, basically. Once this is in your graveyard, and if your fusion monster is then targeted for a card effect, then basically all you need to do is use the effect of Comedy, switch places with that fusion monster on the field, regardless that effect of your fusion monster or saving that fusion monster from ever being destroyed or banished. Most of the cases negated. Yeah, Comedy is one of those case-to-case bases that you need to have in your deck for protection and for disruption. Then we move towards Despian Tragedy. Now, Tragedy is a good searcher once this card is sent to the grave or banished. This searches out your Despia monsters all of the time. Its basic target in order is always Aluber, Ad Libitum, Dramaturge, and then we have Comedy. So basically, Comedy is the last one, but nobody really goes towards Comedy from time to time. But yeah, Aluber, Ad Libitum, Dramaturge is your primary targets for this monster. Then we have Dramaturge. Now this is a level 8 monster, which sometimes can break you from time to time. But regardless, if you have a lot of spell cards that can fuse this monster with another monster, then that would be beneficial. Now you might be asking, why is that? Well, mainly Dramaturge, once used as a fusion material, this monster can special summon itself from either in the graveyard or from out of play to your side of the fields. And not only that, Once this card is on the field, every link, fusion summoned, whatever other type is summoned to the field, you can target that monster and that target's effect will be negated. Then we have Ad Libitum of Despia. So Ad Libitum is like tragedy and comedy. This card is rarely summoned to the field. Purpose for this card is to be used as a material. Once used, of course, Ad Libitum targets a fusion or Despia monster that is in your graveyard or banished from play. Then they can special summon that monster to your side of the field. So most often times your target card for this is either your banished Mirror Jade or either your Aluber that is in your graveyard. I think Mirror Jade and Aluber is one of the most useful cards there is once they touch the field. So other than that, that is your Despia Monsters. Now with that out of the way, let's move towards the branded monsters. So here we are, guys, the three branded effect monsters. First of all, we have Mercurier. So this card can be searched with branded in Lost or branded Lost. For the effect of Mercurier, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard to negate a monster effect. If you control a fusion monster that lists Fallen Albaz as its fusion material. Now, you can also banish this card to search out a Fallen Albaz or a monster that mentions it in its name from your deck to your hand. Then we have Albion the Shrouded Dragon. So if this is on your hand or in your graveyard, this monster can send one Fallen of Albaz or any branded spell or trap from your hand or to the graveyard. Then it will use two of the following effects. If the branded spell or trap or the Albaz is sent from the hand, you can spell summon Albion to your side of the field. If the branded spell or trap or Fallen of Albaz is sent from the deck to the graveyard, then you can add Albion to your deck and then draw one card. That's perfect. Draw power as well. Then we have Springhans Kit. So the effect of Kit is kind of like Aluber in a sense. Usually its purpose is to target a branded spell or trap that is in your graveyard or banished and add it to your hand. The downside for this card is return one card on your hand to the bottom of your deck or to your deck chest. That is basically the branded monsters right there. Yeah, we'll talk about the number of copies for all of these cards later on once we're making a deck. So next up, we are going to tackle about spells or the branded spells. First off, we have Branded Fusion. So basically, its effect states fusion summons a monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as material. So you'll have to retrieve those materials from your deck and send it to the graveyard. Your go-to fusion summon monster for every time this card is in play is always Lubellion. Lubellion is actually a stepping stone for Mirror Jade later on. Now for branded opening, you discard one card, then either add the Despia monster from your hand or special summon it to your side of the field. Now basically, this is down to 2 copies now, but before it was to 3 copies. Konami has a way of cutting down the consistency of the branded deck. Your normal targets for this one is always Aluber first, Ad Libitum second, and you have your Dramaturge third. But most often of times you'll just go with Aluber or Ad Libitum for your target card or your targeted cards. Then we have your branded in red. So targets one Despia monster or Fallen of Albaz in your graveyard and then add it to your hand. Now you can either choose to spell summon that monster with materials you have on the field or your hand. Typically this is a quick play spell for a reason, and that reason is to summon Guardian Chimera. Now your graveyard targets is always going to be Tragedy, then you have your Ad Libitum, and lastly your Dramaturge. Now basically Tragedy and Ad Libitum will have the most beneficial of effects once they are used as a fusion material. Tragedy search for another Despia monster. Ad Libitum will spell summon a fusion summon monster or a Despia monster to your side of the field. Dramaturge on the other hand will summon itself once it is used as a fusion material. So either one of those 3 monsters. Then we have lastly the branded Lost. So basically, if you're familiar with the Invoke archetype, this is kind of like a Magical Meltdown in a sense. So branded Lost makes your opponent can target the activation of card effects that fusion summons a fusion monster, such as fusion spells like Branded Fusion, Branded Red, and of course Fallen of Albaz that uses its effect to fusion summon a monster. So that's pretty good. This works both ways also with Lubellion and also Albion that fusion summons a monster. This card can also add a monster like Fallen of Albaz or any card that mentions Fallen of Albaz in its name, namely Kit, and of course our Courier. So one of those, your targeted cards are one of those. So that is your spells right there, guys. Let's move towards the core fusion monsters for the deck. So these are the core fusion monsters that you need for the branded Despia deck. So first off, we have Albion. So this card will search out your branded spell. Typically, the go-to spell for this is always branded in red. And I think there's no other card for that. You can either choose for branded opening, but I don't think that will be relevant enough. So the branded spell is going to be set on the field or even added to your hand. It really depends on you. But in most cases, you're going to set that branded in red. Because basically, you're going to use that branded in red to spell summon Chimera during your opponent's turn. And if ever this card is spell summoned to the field, you can fusion summon another fusion monster by banishing materials from the graveyard or the field out of play. So that is one of those core important notes for the Albion. Next up, we have Quartus. So this is actually a very good offensive and defensive card. This actually reduces a non-level 8 or more fusion summon monster to 0 during your main phase. Now basically this will also affect you, so if ever you have a non-fusion monster that is on your field, then it will its attack will turn to 0. This is usually good against other archetypes that is on synchro base, exi base, or even link base. So that's one thing to take note. Other than that, this has a floating effect once it leaves the field by your opponent's card effect. You can spell summon or add to your hand one Fallen of Albaz or one Despia Monster. Your go-to card for this is always Fallen of Albaz if you have a fusion monster that can spell summon by the use of Fallen of Albaz. Other than that, you can just go towards Despia and move to another gameplay later on. Then we have Masquerade the Blazing Dragon. So Masquerade, so in some cases, you will know what your opponent is using or what deck they are using. So heavy activation decks cannot function with this on the field. And I'll tell you why. The ability to burn your opponent for 600 life points every activation may not be significant or such. But take note, this can be stacked to multiple copies of Masquerade on the field. So if you have 2 or more copies on the field, so that's typically 1,200 or more or 1,800 burn damage directly to your opponent's life points. So typically, decks like Floowandereeze or even link-based decks can actually do 6 activations if you have 2 copies of Masquerade on the field. Basically 4 activations if you have 3 Masquerade the Blazing Dragon on the field. So it's pretty useful regarding those kind of decks. Then we have Mirror Jade, of course. Mirror Jade is usually the last monster to be fused on the field after Rebellion, and this card is your primary boss monster on the field. So this can non-target banish one monster in the field. It also has a floating effect in the graveyard or banish if it is sent there by your opponent's card effect. This will allow you to destroy or nuke the entire board of your opponent's monster. So this card is not a hard once per turn. So if you resummon this with the help of Ad Libitum, you can banish another face-up card again. Then you have Lubellion. So Lubellion is the initial fusion monster before summoning Mirror Jade. For a cost of 1 card on hand, you can fusion summon a monster by returning materials from the field, graveyard, and or in the banish zone back to your deck. Usually for summoning Mirror Jade, you use Lubellion and Fallen Albaz in your graveyard for materials, and then basically that's your end board right there. Then we have Guardian Chimera, of course. So Guardian Chimera is usually summoned, or most often the time summoned during your opponent's turn with the help of Branded in Red. Now this is one of your boss monsters, people. So this requires 3 materials to summon. 1 summon to the field, and if it is successful, you can draw 1 or 2 cards depending on the materials on hand, and then you can pop 1 or 2 cards on the field depending on the materials on the field. So that is your purpose for the Branded in Red setting on the field, just to summon your Chimera. Then we move towards the last fusion monster, which is Proskenion. Now, so Proskenion, its primary effect is to spell summon an extra deck monster to your side of the field, or even banish it. It's up to you. So your targeted monsters for this is synchro monsters, link monsters, exes, whatever, as long as they are of different monster types. Another neat effect for this is the ability to burn your opponent's life points depending on the monster this card has destroyed by battle. Now, with that out of the way, let's move towards the other Albaz fusion monsters, which I think it really depends on you if you really want to add that or add those cards into the deck. But here, yeah, let's talk about it. So we have the other fusion monsters used for Fallen Albaz. Now it's really up to you guys if you really want to use these monsters. I think the best fusion monster or other fusion monster for Albaz is Titanic Lad. Gains a lot of attack depending on the number of stars used for the material. But other than that, let's see. So Titanic Lad searches for a Fallen Albaz or Dogmatica during the end phase after this card is sent to the graveyard. So that's basically its own effect. Spring and the Iron Dash searches for a Fallen Albaz or Spring and Skit during the end phase after this is sent to the graveyard. Other than that, any card that is in that column of Iron Dash, as long as it's face up, you can destroy those cards. So basically, it's kind of like Mech Knights, but yeah, it destroys monsters, or it destroys cards on that column. Then we have Brigand the Glory Dragon. So this searches for Fallen Albaz or Tread Brigade Mercourier during the end phase after this card is sent to the graveyard. So that is one of the basic searches for your Mercourier. Then we move towards the tech cards and the engines used for this brand new deck. So the first engine that we're going to tackle is actually the Patchwork Engine. So we have Fright for Patchwork, we have Polymerization, and Edge and Chain. Now basically, if Edge and Chain is sent to the graveyard, you can retrieve a copy of Fright for Patchwork, and then Fright for Patchwork will, once activated, searches for a Polymerization and Edge of Chain. So this is one of the best cards to search out your one material plus another Despia monster or plus another dark monster, depending on the case-to-case scenario on the field. Other than that, Polymerization is also a good card if ever this card is in the graveyard, since this will make your Guardian Chimera untargeted by effect. So basically that is it. I think this is the most useful engine there is for the brand new Despia. Then we move towards the Adventure Engine. So here is the Adventure Engine for you guys. So one Water Enchantress, one Griffin, 2 copies of Rite of Armisier, 1 Dracoback, and lastly 1 Faithful Adventure. So I would be honest with you guys, this is not a good engine as this will restrict actually your normal summon monsters like Albaz or Aluber most of all to not use their effects. Now you might be wondering, what if we use Albaz's effect or Aluber's effect first, then we use Rite of Armisier? Well, basically, it doesn't go right that way. So if ever you normal summon Fallen of Albaz or Aluber to the field and use their effects, then you cannot use the effect of Rite of Armisier. Same goes the other way around. If you use Rite of Armisier, then you try to summon Albaz or Aluber, they can't use their effect. The Adventure Engine can only work for special summon monsters to use their effect, not normal monsters. So this deck will highly restrict you from ever using Aluber's effect, which is primarily the best level 4 there is in your branded deck. So next up, we're going to talk about your searchers for the deck. So there are only 3 searchers that I can think of for this deck, namely this Foolish Burial, your Gold Sark, and of course your Allure of Darkness. These cards are basically the best searchers there is. Foolish Burial, you're always target this one with Tragedy for effect. Then Gold Sark, you're always gonna target always Tragedy also for effect. And then Allure will let you draw 2 cards and then banish 1. If ever you have a Tragedy on hand, then you banish it for effect. So that is basically your cards right there. So next we're gonna talk about your hand traps, boys and girls. So Effect Veiler, Maxi, Snow Rabbit, Ash Blossom, Ghost Bell, Nibiru, and Imperm. So basically, what you'll have here, don't use everything here, but I would say it's not really that beneficial. The always go-to card or the always go-to hand trap that you'll need is just basically Effect Veiler, Maxi, Ash Blossom, Nibiru, or Imperm. In some cases, you don't need Imperm, you don't need Nibiru. That's the only 3 cards that you can need. So next up, we're going to talk about anti-hand traps, Call by Grave and Crossout Designator. That's basically your 2 anti-hand traps right there. Crossout Designator was actually limited in Master Duels just because of its power. So basically, if you are going towards a mirror match for a branded deck, if you have Crossout Designator, you can just win the game instantly. This card negates anything as long as you have the same copy in your deck. Then you have Call by the Grave. You don't have to focus mostly with hand traps for Call by the Grave. You can also target other Despia monsters for your opponent if you're going up against a mirror match, or any monsters for that matter. This is the most strongest spell card there is. So the remaining tech cards for this deck is Fairy Tale Snow, one Ecclesia, the Virtues, and lastly your Super Poly. Now the most significant for this out of the 3 cards is actually Super Poly. Max this out in your deck, guys, with the help of your other fusion monsters. This will actually get you a long way. First of all, Snow Rabbit, banish 7, whether in the graveyard, hand, or field. Summon this one in the field. It actually targets one face-up monster your opponent controls, and then turn them down to face-down defense position. So other than that, you don't have to worry if your monster is banished because you can always retrieve that with the use of Nobillion's effect. Next we have Incredible Ecclesia the Virtuous. So this card can be special summoned to the field. I know this is very prominent in Sword Soul decks, but this can also special summon Fallen of Albaz to your side of the field. So during the end phase, if a fusion monster was sent to the graveyard during this turn, add this card from your graveyard to your hand. Super Poly, it's very straightforward. Target any monster in your opponent's control. Use them as a fodder for your fusion summon. Basically, I'll talk about the other fusion monsters that you'll need for Super Poly. So with regards to your targets for Super Poly, we have Mud Dragon of the Swamp. So its basic materials is 2 monsters with the same attribute, but different type. So if you're going up against a Sword Soul deck, you have Baron and Thea as one of your targets for Super Poly. Go for Mud Dragon of the Swamp. It's very funny. Other than that, the effects for this one is you change this monster's attribute to a specific one, and that target cannot be targeted, I think. Yeah, your opponent cannot target this card or monsters on the field with the same attribute. So it's basically a good card. Then we have here Starving Venom the Fusion Dragon. This card just needs 2 materials on the field to be fusion summon. Basically, if you're going up against DDDs or even a mirror match for Branded Despia, this is actually a good target for Super Poly. Other than that, if this monster is destroyed on the field and sent to the graveyard, or just basically destroyed, you can nuke the entire field as long as those monster is special summoned. Then lastly, we have Predaplant Tribe of Venatum. So Tribe of Venatum, so just like Starving Venom, the materials needs to be on the field, and it requires 3 dark monsters. So most often of times, people are not using this, but I think this is really good in some cases, but in some cases only. So it's really up to you if you want to use this. Then we have lastly Predaplant Dragostipelia. So if you're going up against a mirror match for the branded decks, 1 fusion, 1 dark monster is always a good target for Super Poly. Of course, you can target 1 face-up monster that your opponent controls, place 1 Predaplant counter on it. Every monster that has a Predaplant counter cannot use its effect, so it's pretty good actually. And this goes pretty well with Cordis on the field. So the last cards that we're gonna tackle today, guys, is Toolbox Monsters, and which is we have our Anima, our Almirage, and lastly our Verte Anaconda. So first off, our Anima, they can link this off to from with the use of Tragedy or Comedy. Very powerful to suck 1 opponent's monster, and then gain its attack power. Other than that, we have Almirage, a good protection for any monsters for that matter. Verte Anaconda is one of the best, I would say. Although it is a link monster, this card is not bad in Master Duel. You just need to pay 2,000 life points, and you can use Branded Fusion, Super Poly, or even just a normal polymerization directly from your deck, just sending it to the graveyard, basically. Other than that, that is your Toolbox Monsters. So that is basically everything that you need to know with regards to the Branded Despia. Now let's try to make a deck. To start off, we'll move towards Despia. For me, I run with 1 copy of Comedy, 1 copy of Dramaturge, 3 copies of Tragedy, 2 max out opening, branded in red, 3 or 2 copies, whichever I choose, 1 Cordis, 1 Proskinion, 1 Ad Libitum, 3 copies of Aluber. And that's basically my lineup right there for Despia. Now for the branded monsters, let's go towards Albaz. Let's see. We have here 3 copies of Albaz, 1 Albion, Where's Mercurier here? 2 copies of Lebellion, 2 copies of Mirror Jade, 1 Titanic Lad, 2 copies of, or 2 copies of Albion, 1 Brand Lost, 1 Mercurier. What else? What else here? 3 copies of Brand Infusion, of course, your important card. Basically that's it. Oh yeah, Patchwork Engine. So the Patchwork. So Edge and Chain, Edge Imp. I run with 3 or 2 copies of Edge and Chain, depending on you guys. 2 copies of Patchwork and 2 copies of Polymerization. So the more materials, the better. That's what I say. Call the Grave. We go with the 1 Snow. Very useful for the deck. You can normal summon it and then target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. Cold Grave, cross out. Now, if you're running cross out, be sure that you're also using hand traps. So at this point on, I'll go with Ash Blossom. So Ash Blossom right there, and then we have Maxi. So that is your main deck there, guys. It's complete the extra deck. Super Poly. Oh yeah, forgot about Super Poly. So 1 copy of 1 copy of that. So you can do with 1 copy of this Super Poly. Super Poly. Let's complete our extra deck master. Starving. Dragon. Swamp. We have Guardian Chimera, of course. 2 copies of Guardian Chimera. 2 copies of Guardian Chimera. And lastly, we go for Predaplant, Dragostapelia. So that is your deck right there, guys, for the brand new SPS. The 2 copies for Maxi, it's either you want to choose. Honestly, I would like to choose 3 copies of Maxi, but I don't want to go beyond 40 cards. You can either go for 3 Maxis or 2 Ash Blossoms, or whichever do you want. It doesn't really matter because the most important ones are actually your Despia or your branded cards. So I don't. At this point on, I don't want to. You know what? Let's get branded lost. Oh, we got the branded lost. Did we miss anything? I think that's it. Yeah, basically. So let's just go for this kind of ratios. So that is the deck profile for you guys. So that is the deck for the brand new Despia, and that is the whole guide for the brand new Despia deck. So if you like this kind of content, please feel free to subscribe. I'll ask the community once again to for more guides like this in the near future. Keep safe, good luck, guys, and have a good night. Bye-bye.